Hi everybody, Matt and Tom back with you. Hope you're okay. A poem was written in 1770 about an event that happened in Heptonstall in 1482. In that poem it suggested that Heptonstall Church was closed for 24 days to cleanse it of bloodshed. But what exactly had happened? We're going to go back through the mists of time and see if we can figure out exactly what happened in that church nearly 600 years ago. So for this video you're going to see a lot more of Tom than me, and what I'm interested in is what is this poem about, and then where are we going. So it's quite a long poem.
It is. It's got 45 verses, and a lot of them are very flowery. It was written by a Reverend J. Fox. Not been able to find out anything about him, but he's attributed to it in 1770, and it deals with the Earl of Warren. Right, now a lot of this is going to be debunked, but it deals with a man called the Earl of Warren, who was Lord of the Manor of round here, and he was out hunting one day and he got to Horsehold, which is where he stabled some horses. It was a sort of place with herdsmen's huts, a little hamlet just round this corner. We can have a quick look there in a minute. And he used to stable up his horses there, and his daughter, she felt faint, and his daughter Christabel, and that's quite important for later, she felt faint, so she stayed back in Horsehold, and let's see what happened there. So his daughter was there with the stable boy, who apparently had a mysterious and dark look about his brow, and they'd been friends for a very long time, and the Earl had trusted him, and he wanted to ask the Earl for his daughter's hand in marriage, but alone the passion took them over, and off they decided to elope to Heptonstall.
So we've been to Horsehold. Now we've come back down, uphill again, Heptonstall. All these places are so easy to reach. So of course we're talking about this song, but we haven't told you what the song is yet. There is no better balladeer than Mr. Thomas Steer. That rhymes. Right, hang on. I'm going out of the shot for this one.
Wait a minute, there we go. Now it's a bit 1770, right. It was in the time when leaves grow red and bracken brown in the valley, and no bird trilled his roundelay in dusky woodland alley. Oh, pleasant is fair Calderdale when children full may gowan. Pleasant the hills in the year's care days when berries hang on the rowans. Anyway, it goes on. I won't give you any more, but goes on to tell a very airy-fairy version of the... There's 45 verses. That was
Banger!
Two.
A banger! It's the Ed Sheeran of 1770.
He was from round over there,
He was, just across the road.
Across the road. Yeah, anyway, it goes on to tell the story rather than just describing how beautiful Calderdale was, and it tells the story of the Earl of Warren. Now, as I say, I should debunk this now. The Earl of Warren died out 100 years before any of this happened, and I looked up his illegitimate children who inherited his lands, and they all lived in Norfolk, so I don't think it's them. But in the story it says he came over from Blackstone Edge, he went past Ewood Tower, and he came up here and off to Heptonstall. and he was following his daughter up there. His daughter, of course, had already got married. She'd found the priest, and he'd been hesitant to do it, but she had a lot of fear and love about her, apparently, according to 1894 recollections. And she had all this fear, and so they married, and off they went. Off they went. So, as the story and the song goes, as the Earl of Warren reached Horsehold, over there where we were earlier, he saw a peasant chap and said, "Does anyone see my daughter?" And the peasant chap said, "Oh aye, I saw her walking by with this chap, the stable boy, and the stable boy had his hand round her waist, and he said that you'd forgive him for being in love because they'd been married." And so the Earl of Warren, he was furious, wasn't he? So he ran off over here. He came down here on his horse, and
very good horse, sir.
and a very good horse, and up here, and on a very treacherous path, it says.
All right.
That could
Up
be
to
this.
Heptonstall.
Up to
Could
Heptonstall.
well be this one. We may well find out how treacherous
Find out.
as we go. Okay, so now we are in the churchyard of Heptonstall, and this is the St Thomas of Beckett ruins behind me. This is quite a unique churchyard because we have the old church here, and the newer church is through the trees. You can't quite see it, just take my word for it. There's a church there as well, which is still in use, which was built after this one. It was decided was no longer usable. And this has stood here for hundreds of years in different forms. And our story, I think, continues inside.
So the Lord, rushing into the church to find his daughter and her new husband and slay them both possibly, came into the church to discover that they had already gone. In fact, they had darted off that way over the hills to Widdop. So, who did the father find? Well, he found the priest and he slayed him. He slayed him in his own church. Now, this is the Earl of Warren, supposedly, even though he died out 100 years before, please remember that. There is a little bit of information on this that is historically accurate. So, on December the 20th, 1482, a licence was granted in Heptonstall for people, parishioners, to practice their own weddings, funerals and christenings in their own houses for a period of 24 days, so that they could cleanse the church after it was polluted by a great effusion of blood. And it was also in the churchyard, so this was a tremendous...
So the priest was massacred,
The
essentially.
priests, and I presume more than just one. I mean, as well, this is 5 days before Christmas, to shut then.
Wow.
But it took place here, and the only thing is, it's only recorded in this one Archbishop of York's records. There's nothing about it in the Wakefield Port records, and I've looked into it. There was no vicar that died, or change of vicar, from 1482, sorry, or in Halifax either, because they were connected to Halifax and Halifax.
Right.
So
are we suggesting it happened, or are we suggesting the poem was just written?
it happened. Certainly, there was certainly a big massacre here.
Right.
And the poem and the story that's told certainly has some other historical characters that are attributable. But I think to discover them, we need to head down to Mytholmroyd.
Okay. So this place closed for 24 days. 24 days to cleanse it of blood. Amazing.
So, the ballad and the story continue, and the Lord, he leaves the church and he goes out down towards Widdop Way as they're heading over towards the border of Lancashire, which you have to remember, it's the War of the Roses. It's a very vibrant place. And as he's heading down towards them, the son-in-law, his new son-in-law, and daughter, he catches up with him, and he sees the Lord coming towards him with his men. So the son-in-law pulls his own dagger out and stabs himself.
Oh, wow.
And of course then, the father, the Earl of Warren, supposedly, sees his daughter and how grief-stricken she is, and they hug, and she goes and lives with him, and they have a really close relationship, apparently, but they never speak of it again. When he dies, she goes off and lives in a convent.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, a sad tale, but as I say, there is some historical...
Still something to discover.
Some stuff to discover.
Okay, so where are we heading next?
We're now going to head to Ethelborough Hall, which is in Mytholmroyd.
Okay.
Well, my lord.
So it's interesting, Tom, that you've just talked about Ethelborough Hall. This is a family grave here. This is my great-grandparents. And interestingly, and I didn't know this till we just came to have a look, Bertha, Ethelborough Hall. So we're actually going to somewhere my relatives were.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's a very special hall.
Wow. Well, let's find out when we get there.
I'm impressed, my lord. It's like calling you his nymphs.
Mytholmroyd, our next stop.
That's right. So, now for a bit of historical truth. In both the song and various other tellings of the tale, there is this talk of a Christabel being the maiden. And also, there's a talk of Ewood Tower. Now, I started looking up, thinking that Christabel probably wasn't a very likely name, much as Walter, who's also in the poems, probably not a very likely name, but rhymes with colder. Anyway, so Christabel, turns out she is a real life person. She was living up the road at the Lord of the Manor and in charge of the King's Hunt of all of Sorbishire or Herdwick Forest, which is all this area, including Horsehold in Errington. Her father, John Pilkington. She lived at Ethelborough Hall with him, and she had an interesting life. Her father was one of the King's men, and whilst King Edward IV was imprisoned at Middleham Castle by the Kingmaker Neville, Earl of Warwick, Richard III came and stayed at Ethelborough Hall, along with Edmund, who lived just around there at Mytholmroyd, not the electric.
No, okay. That one.
Just round there.
Oh, wow. That is a very old building.
That's where Edmund lived.
Right.
And John Pilkington up at Ethelborough. So, whilst Richard, who was at the time Duke of Gloucester, was at Ethelborough Hall plotting with all them, all the Pilkingtons and the Harringtons of Brearley, they suggest that he may have got Christabel pregnant.
Oh.
And the result of that pregnancy was John, named after her father, remember, John, who was John of Gloucester, who was executed by Henry VII a bit later on. But anyway, he is a known bastard of Richard's, a natural child of Richard, sorry. But no one knows who his mother is. There are a few theories. But this document that was discovered in Ewood Hall, which we need to go to in a minute, suggests that Christabel could have been the mother. And he was certainly here at the time. And was he sowing oats? Well, there's all sorts of theories about that. So, what happens to Christabel after she has her illegitimate child at Ethelborough Hall?
Ethelborough Hall?
Ethelborough Hall, yeah,
Wow.
which was at the time a fortified manor house, very powerful at the time. Anyway, next year after that, she marries a chap called Henry Ferrer, who we know was quite a poor chap in his 20s who lived up at Lum, which is a bit of land just underneath Bell House. And Henry Ferrer, or Farrar as he became later known, was given masses of land at Ewood Hall, which also had lands at Midgley Moor. And he and Lady Christabel had many children together, but John was not inherited from him because he wasn't his. And yeah.
So this hall
Is Elphaba Hall.
Elphaba Hall,
Where the Pilkinsons lived,
Mm.
who were the lords of the manor.
right,
Time
and
of
some relation to the coiners.
And also, David Hartley's brother lived here many years later,
Yeah.
during the time.
And many years later still was
Bertram and Bertha Parker.
my great-grandparents. Amazing.
So here we are at Ewood Hall, and this is the happy bit of the story. So we have Henry Ferrer, who is a poor man, and Christabel, Lady Christabel, who is with child, possibly to the king. And the reason it's possibly to the king is because Henry Ferrer, a poor man, was given all this land here at Ewood, and he didn't inherit the chap either. So why was a poor commoner, a tenant of the Pilkinsons, given such a big gift? Well, because a royal bastard may be a bastard, but has the potential of being shown at court and legitimised, and thus needs a proper education, tutoring and nutrition, as well as being taught the manners and protocols expected of a royal, and that costs money. So Mr. Pilkington gave a load of money to Mr. Ferrer, and thus started the Farrars wool empire, which started about 1470 and continued on up and for about 400 years. So that is more or less the end of the story, and there's not a lot of historical accuracy with the song. I think that's what we've learned, but there are lots of historical truths involved in it as well.
Yeah. Fascinating. Okay, there we go. So that is our look at the story, the poem, the Ballad of Heptonstall, and exactly what happened and some of the people involved. And it certainly takes some very interesting twists and turns when it becomes, suddenly we find Richard III is in there and quite a few other historical figures. So, fabulous research. Well done. So, good stuff. Let us know what you think. Put some comments below, like and share, and all the good stuff. And we'll see you for the next video soon. Take care.